Hello, welcome to the Naked Chapel. I am Mark, and welcome to this experiment, this journey, this project. It is an opportunity to gather, to chat, and to explore rethinking about what church could look like, whether it is a different way of being church, doing church, or different elements that add up to our church and worship and fellowship experience. Today it's not just me, we are joined by some lovely guests that I have, dare I say, volunteered, roped in, or otherwise. So it is a pleasure to introduce. In fact, just before I do, someone has opened the door. Hello. My daughter is joining me unexpectedly. So that will be fun. Come here then, little one. I'm just broadcasting, so hello. You okay? You a bit tired? Okay. Well, unexpected already within 30 seconds. I'm going to introduce a few guests into the show. I'm going to start off with my good friend Rach. If you'd like to come and join me. Hello, Rach. How are you doing?
Are you, little one?
I think she's very tired. She should be asleep.
Oh, bless her.
Yes, I think she was just going to nuzzle into me. So Rach, I believe that we've known each other for quite a good few years, really, haven't we?
I've known each other for 13 years. For 16 years.
Yes. So that's quite a long time, really, and in a good way. And then we're also going to be joined by Elliot too. And so Elliot, I've known you for a little bit less, shorter, and and would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. I mean, I'm Elliot. We met a few years ago, I suppose. I'm over in neighbouring districts in Yorkshire North and East, doing techie stuff. So it's kind of how we met and know each other. And very excited to be here.
Good. Well, thank you for joining us. And also, we have on the tech tonight, we have Paul as well. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Would you like to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, I'm Paul. I have probably known Mark for the shortest amount of time, but he has the misfortune to work with me, so he can't escape.
Yeah, that's cool. And so tonight we are going to be exploring together a little bit about what church means or could mean to us, or different ways of envisaging what church could be. And I think we're going to hear from Rach first. Could we just have the little cue card up there, Paul? And the first suggestion. So, Rach, would you like to explain a little bit, or give us a starting gambit about bike church?
Yeah. I would love to start a bike church, and the idea is still kind of rattling around in my head a little bit. I think I know how I would start it, but it was how would I keep it going? So if anybody who's listening tonight has any ideas about bike church, then please put some comments in the chat for us, because I'd love to hear from you as well. All I know, Mark, is that I love being out on my bike, and I don't do it enough. And it's one of those experiences for me where I can forget about everything else that might be going on. It's the rhythm of the pedals that just takes my mind off other things, really, and allows me that thinking space. I think because you're doing something that is rhythmical, that you then end up kind of thinking about the pedaling, but then other things start to come into my head. And for me personally, I really find it's a place and a time where I connect with God. So I've been part of an organisation called Breeze, which particularly encourages women to get out on their bikes. And I had the most incredible conversations when you kind of like knock the walls down. You asked at the beginning what on the intro, what would we change? And I guess I'm not simply changing the building, I'm changing the whole venue.
Yeah, that's
Taking
cool.
us outside,
Yeah.
out into the spaces, out into some incredible countryside that we have around. So for me, Bike Church is a place where I would hope that people could discover God the Creator, but also have that freedom to have the conversations that when you're pedaling, you don't have to look at anybody particularly. So you can have different kinds of conversations, can't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot more I could say about Bike Church, but that's something I'd love to see.
Yeah. My daughter is a little bit restless. So Bike Church, so getting rid of the building or changing the venue altogether and basing it basically on cycling around.
Get outside.
A faithful peloton or a faith-based peloton of cyclists, or can you actually envisage people chatting as they cycle, or would it be at opportune moments such as cafes or dare I say
I think both, to be honest. So certainly when you cycle, you have conversations with people, unless in my case you're going up a really steep hill, in which case you have to put all your puff into getting up the hill. Hence, I have an electric bike now, so that makes it a lot easier. But also then, yeah, of course, you meet when you stop for lunch and that kind of thing, or coffee or whatever it might be. One occasion when I was first getting back into cycling and I was in the Sheffield area, and there are some really big hills around Sheffield. And there was an amazing lady, Betty Ann. I'm not sure whether she'll be listening to this, but when we were getting up the hill, she rode just behind me and she was saying to me, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, to get the rhythm of pedals. And it was her encouragement that got me up the hills. And I sensed that she was believing in me, and that made such a difference to me. And then when I became a breeze leader and I was helping other people, I found myself doing exactly the same thing, helping others up the hill. And for me, that's very much what church is about, that being the body, the family of God, encouraging one another. So I discovered that out on the bike in a way that was different from being in church.
Cool. Thank you, Rach. Thank you for introducing the subject. Has anybody got anything to add into this conversation about the possibilities of Bike Church?
I don't think I'm quite as much of an avid cyclist as I used to be. I used to sort of do 200 miles a week on my bike, and am now faced with the daunting prospect of going 8 miles across Leeds. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely love it. I think the bit that I'd add in with that is the aspect of bike maintenance. I really enjoy taking my bike apart and putting it back together. I used to work at Centre Parks doing that, so that was always fun. But I had some really good conversations with people over a dismantled bike. And I think I probably learned a lot over a dismantled bike and putting it back together again.
I can see how that kind of really resonates, but for me, I'm rubbish at that kind of thing. So I always take my bike to a bike shop. So there's something in there, if we're talking about faith and discipleship, you're able to kind of undo some of that in your analogy, Paul, whereas I need somebody else to help me with that bit. But then once I've been helped, I'm back on the road again.
I mean, I'm very much in the camp of needing the encouragement to get up hills at the moment. So.
I'm in the camp of the encouragement of getting my bike out of the garage that I've not touched in about 13 years. It's you know that length of time that I've known you for, Rach, that I've not touched the bike for that length of time.
Right. Well, in that case,
I've dutifully moved it from one place to another. There's a comment from Facebook from Angela. Church helping each other get up the hill.
Absolutely.
And as long as people don't kind of heckle from the back too much, you're going 1, 2, 1, 2.
You do stop after a while. But the other great thing that I didn't say, of course, is you can do it with all ages, can't you?
That is true. Not necessarily all abilities, though.
Oh yeah, because even I can get out on a bike, then others can get out on a bike.
That's true. There's definitely lots of varieties of bike, aren't there? And there are
Yeah,
very
yeah.
opportunities.
And
Okay,
variety of
should we move on? I'm going to say another comment from social media. Sorry, Paul, I've pinched your job. Graham has just said, get a bike. I mean, I think that would be quite an important one of Bike Church, to actually have a bike. But then you get into all opportunities for kind of donating bikes and gifting bikes and all that kind of stuff, which it sounds very good. Shall we move on to our next option here? I believe this is a little bit of a what's the word? A little bit of a tangent from Bike Church through to Elliot's choice, which would be silent disco. Sorry, Paul, I'll stop doing that. Elliot, would you like to give a bit of an intro?
Sure, yeah. So I've really gone and picked things that that were kind of humorous to begin with, and then I've tried to work them into how they'd actually be useful. So I thought of this idea that I'd replace, so rather than with a completely blank slate, I thought, well, within the confines of kind of what we would imagine as church, replace the music, songs or worship kind of portions with not necessarily a literal disco, but the kind of the tech from a silent disco. I mean, personally, I hate discos, but anyway, that's beside the point. So the kind of the headphones idea where you can all be listening to your own music, that type of thing, so that you could have worship and music where everyone could be worshipping, but to a song of their choice, a genre of Christian music or whatever it might be, that helps them connect with God. So everyone would have their own version that they're listening to in their ears, and you'd all be singing together completely different things, probably. I mean, it would require some form of maybe like Google Glasses or something, so you could see lyrics to your own individual song. It gets a bit technical then.
This is getting very tech heavy all of a sudden, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the fact, I was thinking it from the other end of the spectrum. I was thinking, how are you going to coordinate? Would you have to like have a beginning worshipy song that people would be comfortable singing, then have it for like a 3-minute kind of song for it to do? You'll have to be very careful with the practicalities.
You can see I haven't fully thought this through.
But that's the whole point. You don't have to think it all through, do we? So silent disco. So listening to stuff. Would the sermon also be in a silent disco format? Tune into your own sermon, or would that be the bit where you gather people together rather than that individual experience?
Yeah, I hadn't considered that. I almost like that idea, but I think I prefer that. Otherwise, you might all be attending different services altogether. It seems a bit maybe counterintuitive to gather at all. So I think I'd say the sermon should be probably something you all listen to together.
That's true. There needs to be a collective moment, doesn't there, in that? That's cool. Throwing it open to everyone else. What do others think about the silent disco approach to worship?
I don't mind a silent disco so long as nobody can see my dancing. I have 2 left feet.
Fair enough. I can't comment on that really. So,
from the techie viewpoint, I'm having complete nightmares about the idea of those systems. I've worked with them a couple of times, and they're fine when they work.
Yeah. Of course, the idea with the silent disco is that you often have kind of playlists, don't you, where you can, I mean, I've seen them at like weddings and things where you can tune into different kind of things. Whereas the individuality of this does pose a lot of challenges.
There are lots of challenges with it, aren't there? But I'm conscious of a conversation just yesterday where people were saying in church, sometimes we say, oh, that didn't do anything for me. So then you could have the kind of music that allows you to come into that worship space, couldn't you? But it could be fun if you all finished at different times.
I think the more I think about it, I like the idea of it, but then there's the practicality elements and the people who are not wanting to change their playlist because they like the same songs week in, week out, or dare I say, it would be nice to actually really kind of flip it on its head and invite people to choose different playlists for one another, and so you're purposely not getting the same thing.
Would you have everyone choosing their own music, or would you have a set list of curated playlists that you'd use?
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, that's
like,
good.
yeah,
Or maybe
traditional
at
or
each point where you'd have a
contemporary
hymn, you'd have a selection that you could choose from. So you might all have 4 options that you can pick from, which would mean that you could time it so they're roughly the same length.
Yeah, well, that's it. If you can curate the playlist, then you can get them exactly all matched down. You're giving people an option for the opportunity to also have communal moments in their individuality. So you could have like people to ask that question of, did you go for the chilled kind of worship slot, or did you go for the rave kind of option? And that'll be hopefully cultivating those sort of conversations. So yeah, no, I'm liking that.
There's another really important aspect to this, actually, that we have significant numbers in our churches who might have specific needs, and people with autism or people who struggle with loud sounds. Actually, that would enable them to access worship as well, wouldn't it, in a different kind of way? Like you said, it needs thinking through, because you want people to feel involved and together, but there could be some advantages in it.
There's a couple of questions on here, or a couple of ponders as well. Graham says there's definitely lots of conversations about appropriate worship music at the moment. And various people who have been writing worship songs or otherwise. But I think there's usually a conversation about appropriate kind of secular music that we use, the stuff that's kind of broader and wider, further afield. And kind of what we should be choosing, or how we can kind of incorporate that sort of stuff in, whilst being sensitive of the language and the reasons behind it. And Graham's also then kind of talked about lyrics can be so triggering in all sorts of different ways that we can always that we're not always aware of until we bring them together, and that we can share them. And I think that's a real good moment as well. And Angela has also said about she didn't really think that there is a very communal element to it, but I think at the point of where you're listening to it, it might not be. But the times of where you draw together in other ways at church, like over the coffee or in the moments of discussion or things like that, and then I think there can be those moments of then kind of chewing over what it means for individuals. So I kind of like that. So thank you. Should we move on to another suggestion? Go on, Paul. Would you like to introduce one of yours? You said I think it's gaming.
Yeah. I am an avid PC gamer. I have been since I first got hold of a computer. And yeah, I've come across a few examples of gaming as part of church. A friend of mine does Minecraft church, and they've just started a server for over 20s, which I found quite interesting. But I've been doing lots of reading about how you can use gaming as an aspect of prayer. And I do that quite a lot. I was actually doing it earlier this afternoon. I'm playing a spaceflight simulator in which there's little bits of action, but there's long periods of almost nothing, with this sort of starscape streaming past you as you're going on to your next destination. And I find that quite good. I am not very good at sitting still. And I find sitting still in prayer with nothing going on apart from prayer to be really difficult to concentrate on. So being able to kind of focus on this background and on the background stuff going around, but at the same time be able to pray with that, I find really useful. So there's definitely that, and I really enjoy it. And I think the other one is that we've for a long time we've talked about films as a way of exploring faith topics, and films are really easy to talk about, but gaming can bring a completely different way of understanding narrative to our explorations of the Gospels, of faith stories, of dealing with ethical and moral dilemmas. So it just opens up a completely different set of questions and tools that we can use. And there's a lot of people who really enjoy gaming. who we often do not engage with very well.
Yeah, sometimes I don't know about you, but it feels as if it's sometimes a taboo subject, or almost like it's of a certain genre that a lot of people in church don't really approach very quickly or very easily. But that being said, one thing that just struck me, Paul, was about, and I know that we're of a similar age, and so there's very much more of the social interaction of gaming, where you'd be inviting friends around, or nowadays online, that you sit around playing the same game and talk to one another. And so there's that kind of opportunity to, believe it or not, kind of to multitask and just kind of play something that doesn't require a lot of thinking in some regards, but you can be using kind of functions to get, to alleviate, to allow you to kind of free up your mind to talk in other ways, or be a bit more comfortable in chatting as you're playing. That being said, I think there's still moments when I've got to fall quiet because I've got to concentrate on, Lara doing that, or ... Any other thoughts, everyone else, about gaming?
I assume you're rather than imagining that people would come and game in a church, you're imagining that it would be a kind of church within the gaming space.
I think it can be either. I mean, the Minecraft church, you've got the people I know that do it, they'll bring a bunch of tablets and they'll run a server in the service, and you'll do activities whilst doing it. You'll also have people doing stuff at home. So, I mean, the types of things you can do with that are, you might have a service theme around sort of overcoming obstacles, and as part of your gaming session, you might be sort of journeying across this sea in Minecraft, or trying to build a bridge over a chasm. So there's all sorts of different things that you can do that kind of subtly reinforce what's going on. Alternatively, you can just have that in in a game world, and people have done that. There's actually a VR church as well, which I've got to admit I'm not quite so sure I'm 100% on board with. But it's church in a virtual space, and again, it's kind of, we're getting rid of the walls. And the conversations, I would imagine, that you have whilst you're gaming online with a group of friends, or sitting on your sofa with a group of friends, might be somewhat similar to the types that you might have on a bike ride. It's not the focus of it. The focus is on where you're going and what you're doing, but the conversations happen incidentally, and possibly in a slightly more comfortable manner, because you're not having to make eye contact with someone.
Yeah.
Would you have games that are already on the market, or would you look to develop something that is more kind of scripture based, like a Tower of Babel kind of game? And I love Graham's idea, like those adventure books where if you went to page whatever, and if you went somewhere else, went to a different page, could you have that idea in your game as well?
Well, yeah, role-playing games are definitely a thing. And that can be a lot of fun. I mean, if you translate that away from computer gaming, you can then get into, what happens if you have a D&D campaign. The one I've been thinking about recently is Dungeons and
Dragons.
Oh, thank
you.
So
what happens if you do that? And, you could actually say, rather than trying to play out a Bible story, your group are the messengers taking one of Paul's letters to
there you go, yeah.
destination. How would you explore those ideas?
It comes at a free slope of, dare I say, slight cheese, through to kind of awkward theology, maybe, or opening the door to kind of angels going rampant and not delivering the message because or they kind of accidentally get left behind. I think it'd be an interesting one, and maybe a conversation for another day about the D&D stuff, the role-playing stuff. Gaming, I think, is an interesting dynamic there. What we mentioned about, would you actually create your own thing or be part of something that already exists? And I guess it depends exactly how we kind of use it, and how we envisage that using that tool to communicate what church is and how we develop it, and whether it's like an adventure and that we kind of draw the values from it, or if it's a place that we go to and experience it together. And I think there's overlap between both of those. It's interesting also that Angela, not sure about it, but thought that her 15-year-old might be interested in that sort of thing. Graham touched upon about the fact that Games Master, I think it's actually back as well. The Games Master in the late 90s used to use a lot of religious imagery, and Graham said that it was filmed in a church. And it is interesting, of how society kind of sometimes uses religious imagery to kind of, lift it, elevate it, and yet we kind of try to be really cool and non-churchy, man, and it's just interesting. Random interest. Discovered on Saturday that Saturday Morning Kitchen, I don't usually have a chance to see that, but that also filmed in a deconsecrated church, because I imagine it's good space and good acoustics for these kind of TV studios. So yeah, very interesting. Thank you, Paul. Let's keep going. I'm aware of time. We're going to go on to Rach's next one of Coffee Fellowship. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think the intro said, what would you change about church, wasn't it? And I'd love to see the coffee that we share as an opportunity to talk about what we might have heard or been engaged with in worship, rather than just what's the weather or what are you doing tomorrow. Those things, what you're doing tomorrow, can be important, but I long to see people actually having conversations about the worship, about the message that might have been in church. And I guess in some ways it's as simple as that, really, just that we would continue those conversations and have an opportunity to say whether we agreed or disagreed or put different points of view. I run something that's called Jigsaw for a group. It tends to be older people who are coming to it, and we have a sacred space as part of that. And there's one amazing gentleman, Roger, and he always comes up and shares with me after I finished something really insightful. And I wish that we had those kinds of conversations over coffee, and that we could then share them with more people as well. That's what I long for.
I'm going to jump in at this point, because I think as well as you're offering and talking about Coffee Fellowship, Elliot has chosen something similar, very similar, but slightly different. And so I'm going to kind of bring in Elliot's coffee shop idea. Would you like to kind of add into that, or do you want me to feed into that, Elliot?
Yeah, I can. So I suppose, coffee is often a thing that comes up, doesn't it, when you mention about churches and what would you change or improve. And so I suppose alongside the fellowship side of it, I was kind of pitching for a kind of extravagant welcome type thing of providing a full-blown, whether it's a Costa coffee or whether it's like a
other coffee shops are available.
Yeah. Or something, more independent or ethically, whatever. But coming with everything with it, so kind of all the mod cons, the seating, the comfy spaces, the staff and the welcome and all that with it, and as well as really good coffee and variety of coffee, which I would love to have at church, but isn't always available. Just having that, showing that we value people in what we offer them, I suppose, is where I was coming from.
Yeah, and that says something about kind of what's the word, catering, and what's the word, hospitality. Thank you, Rach. Yeah, that real kind of generous hospitality that we often, well, sometimes we miss out on at church. So I quite like both of those ideas of having that intentional space over coffee to talk about church and otherwise. Because I found it was interesting that we lived in the middle of nowhere, and we travelled to church for about 4 miles in a car altogether. And it was interesting. It was in the journey back from church is where we had our God conversation, where we may talk about what the preacher said, or what the preacher didn't say. That was the time. A Sunday is normal, but there was that window of conversation. I think it was also something about we couldn't get out of the car. But I mean, you're kind of in that kind of that space and that opportunity. And again, it ties into a bit of when you're focusing on doing something else, then the opportunity to talk to one another could be maybe richer. And so therefore enjoying over coffee, especially dairy, David kind of socialise over coffee, and so why can't we fellowship over coffee as well and make it a good one? I won't mention the church, but I am a bit particular with my coffee and with my instant coffee, that I would say, can I have the milk in first? And one church I went to said, oh yeah, is that because it burns the granules? And I went, yeah, it's exactly why. And I was thinking, so why, if you know the reason why why I like to have it like that, why do you continue to burn the granules? I didn't have the heart to ask them that, but yeah, it's a shame when coffee can be under par. So that's what we say.
So Angela just beat me to what I was about to say, and it kind of comes onto the point that Graham's made in the comments, that we struggle sometimes to do it in our own buildings, but we can partner with other people. And I love the idea of Coffee Shop Sunday, which is based down in Coventry, meeting in a Costa cafe in the shopping centre on Sunday afternoons. I think they go with the tagline, meeting God in an ordinary place.
Yeah.
And that's... I've really enjoyed the conversations with Trevor and Joe about that, and I'm looking forward to maybe visiting at some point when I feel more comfortable with travelling down there.
I love the idea of meeting God in the ordinary place, because that for me resonates again with the bike church. So, but also COVID has reminded us how much we've missed that fellowship of coffee. So therefore, to do it well and to encourage conversations that help us to grow in our discipleship and faith, for me, both of those things are important.
That's good. That's good. And I'm also going to just put Paul on the spot as well, because I think this continues to tie in with your suggestions as well. So we've covered coffee and the coffee shop idea. Paul, you are going to talk about food, aren't you?
Yes.
Quite a nice broad subject, but again, it falls into... Go on.
Well, first of all, I'm definitely going to say I'm really in favour of good coffee in churches, because having been to church in the States a lot where there was good coffee, and the worship group I sang in had coffee and donuts before the service, I really missed that. I would love that somewhere here. But the other thing that happened was we would often go out as a worship group or as a youth group afterwards, and we'd go to a local restaurant and have a really good meal together. And for the last few years, whilst I've been studying and doing other similar activities, one of my favourite activities has been cooking and having people over for dinner. And there is just that thing about cooking together, eating together, and having that time together that completely changes the dynamic of a conversation in a way that even having coffee together doesn't quite do. Something about that intimate setting that I really like. Even if it's, there's a huge bowl of chili on the side over there, dig in, grab a drink, and just chat with whoever's around. There's just something different about that dynamic. And I think that even includes... I never quite count cafe church as this. Cafe church doesn't seem to have quite the same thing. We seem to sit around tables and then do a normal church service whilst drinking coffee, which is a start.
Well, yeah, it depends on the church, I think. But yeah, I think there is a definite element of cafe church being biscuits on a plate kind of church. And I think if you're introducing things like food, then hopefully it'll be more like banquet church, like a proper spread on,
complete abundance,
tables all the way down, and there isn't a formal structure. there is an opportunity, maybe questions on the table, but that's as near as cafe church you get. But the informality of sitting next to each other, eating together at very early church, yeah, absolutely, it's in the Bible, isn't it? You know, the Last Supper as well. I think we, in communion, we kind of have this kind of after supper, Jesus broke bread. You know, we skip to the broke bread bit rather than eating together and really enjoying that fellowship together. And I think that's a bit of a shame in some respects, but I realise the practicalities issue and the traditional form that it has taken. But to once in a while just to have a proper banquet and eat together, and I think there's something there about tending to each other physically, and to say, look, you know, if you're hungry, come and eat in abundance.
It was really interesting, Mark. I was on a bike ride just the other weekend, and I cycled to Bradford, and as I came back, I passed the Gurdwara, and I just happened to stop, and two ladies were coming down the steps, and they said to me, "Go in. There's plenty of food. You can leave your bike. You can take your bike in, so you don't need to leave it outside. Just go and help yourself." All you need to do, obviously, was to cover my head. But I thought then that hospitality, the fact that the Gurdwara was always open, and she said anybody can go in and help themselves to the food that was in there. I thought that was a wonderful, for me, that was kingdom. I just found that really, really beautiful, and a little bit sad that we're not able to do that in our churches at the moment.
Yeah. Graham's touched on Touchstone offering about their multi-faith event. We invite people to cook one of their favourite meals. That sounds quite a nice element, doesn't it? Of inviting people to come in with their best or with their favourite elements.
Yeah.
That would be fun to enjoy, because there's something then also about how you present the thing that you really like, that you're really kind of close to, and I guess it's that kind of opening up and putting yourself out there to say, you know, this is something I really enjoy, and you're putting it before others to sort of offer to them to kind of meet you where you are offering in your hospitality, and obviously helps culture. There's kind of conversations again. There's informal stuff around.
You know how we have services where we have like pick your favorite hymn, that songs of praise. We can pick up on Paul's idea and bring your favorite meal. Wouldn't that be ace?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So we've generated quite a few thoughts. We're coming to the end. We've got just a couple more left to do. I'm going to come to Elliot next with his suggestion. Now, this might require a little bit more explaining. You would actually put in a couple of alternative titles for this one, but I went for Sleep Cam first. But over to you, Elliot, to introduce this feature that you'd like to bring.
Yeah, okay. So once again, I've gone for a feature that I'm going to bring to a physical building, and again, it's kind of it started from a place of humour and then kind of developed from there. So initially, I was thinking of kind of like the American style kind of kiss cam at like large ball games and things, and then I was thinking about how during the service we could have like a sleep cam that would just for a bit of entertainment, really. Show people that had dozed off in the congregation, but I thought maybe ethically it's not the best idea, and I wasn't quite sure how that kind of helped us, you know, get closer to God and worship. But I thought it had a secondary use which would be quite good, which would be to enable a bit more audience participation. And again, I would actually hate this in practice, but the idea was it would be kind of like an engagement camera where it would kind of pan round and select someone, and maybe during the sermon there could be like questions or something, and you'd have to on the spot give your thoughts or something, or you know, ask a question, or just enabling the service to be a bit less kind of just consumeristic and a bit more engagement with kind of the audience.
Yeah, no, again, that participation element, and in some respects, when most of us were on the Zoom over lockdown, that was actually a very easy way, because we could then easily highlight or spotlight the screen of of the individual who you'd like to kind of invite on, whereas actually the practicalities of that in church. I was going to say Groves, but that's horrific. He's laughing. But you could almost have like your pan tilt zoom cameras to come in and kind of focus in on people, unless you have a volunteer to operate the camera.
Mark, during Zoom, you could hone in on the people who had fallen asleep as well, couldn't you? You actually saw it.
I couldn't possibly say whether I'd seen that or not. But again, yeah, I definitely like the participation element of it, and dare I say, with a lot, sometimes church does kind of get into this lecture style of where and of the old style lectures, not like the modern ones now, where you do kind of get more participation. If there's one person up at the front and we're there to give them their attention, and that's it, and that's all there is, and yet actually we kind of hope for more interaction, more kind of liaising and chatting and trying to lift people out from their observation into that participation. And I think that would be quite an interesting way to go with a cam, a sleep cam or a kiss cam. I think it might raise a lot more issues than what it resolves. But I'd like anyone else to comment on that.
It just reminded me like of an Anton Deck show, or those shows where they pan round and they catch somebody in the audience. You could catch somebody and then do a like this time tomorrow with them, or something like that. But yeah, it would keep us on our toes, wouldn't it?
Oh, you see, now I'm thinking about like the is it Noel Edmonds, and instead of clicking your fingers and suddenly being in someone's living room.
Yes.
But yeah, that again could catch people out.
It's only good. Yeah.
Graham's put, does that matter if you're doing other stuff at other points during the week? Yeah, it was definitely an interesting experiment, but I'm not sure the outcome of it would be better than or the entertaining element of it. It'd be versus element. I might be picking on people. Maybe not.
Well, maybe rather than having the cam type idea, you do what gets incorporated into a lot of modern lectures at universities. So you have those sort of spot quizzes throughout where you get to show everyone's responses. So you might have a multiple choice question and actually, what do the 100 people in this lecture theatre think to this? And use that type of interactivity. Doesn't put a single person on the spot, but you might then ask someone to explain their answer or something.
Ask the audience, isn't it? CD.
Yeah.
There's research to show that when you participate out when you respond to things, you remember more of the teaching that's taking place, rather than when you just sit there and absorb it. Because, I mean, to be honest, in most universities, students will just come back and watch the lecture later after they've sat through it because they want to get the notes that they didn't take during the lecture.
Oh, very good. So we've now moved on to like more of a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire like response from the congregation. That'll be interesting.
I like that idea, Elliot.
Just accidentally open to it. Yeah, okay. Moving then a little bit further on to our last offering of the evening, and that is Paul's, which again it kind of moves on from that to photography, from one camera to possibly many.
So definitely not taking photos of sleeping people. Maybe this is actually about a different form of worship, a different form of art. Because as much as in the Methodist Church we love to say that we love singing, there are lots of people who don't love singing or who are not very good at singing. And to be honest, there's a lot of our churches now that just don't have musicians, but people express themselves artistically in lots of different ways. One of my favourite ways, and if you're out in the countryside, you may trip over me on my belly in the mud trying to take a picture of a fungus or a flower, or if you're lucky, some birds. Maybe fiddling with a macro lens or getting the largest possible lens I've got with me out to try and get a decent zoom image. But that, again, that's just a different form of worship. I really enjoy doing that. And I think I sometimes, despite the fact that I've got my piano behind me and I love playing, I love worship music, I often find that I actually almost worship more when I'm out in the countryside taking photographs of the things that I see. And there's the artistic thing of actually I'm capturing something and framing it in a way that lets me share that with other people, who may not always appreciate me sharing my voice with them if they're standing next to me or standing just in front of me. So I think it's just about the idea of actually, in my specific case, photography, but maybe bringing different forms of worship in the church that move us away from just this focus on music and singing.
Yeah. No, thank you. And this might be something that we may approach again in other weeks, about this broadening of what our expectations are of church. But I like that idea of photography and more responding and being creative rather than ways to church where we go all out with cameras, or would it be I'm going to try and say this seriously, some sort of photo club when you kind of gather back together and share the photos. I might have a feeling of a stereotype with that latter one, but
or both,
or would you kind of incorporate it as you go along, or would you be or would you just try and feed it in more subtly into our worship?
I like the idea that people might go out and actually take some photos a week and bring that on along as part of their worship on a Sunday. This is something that I saw, and it's sort of got that temporal aspect to it as well. It's a fixed point in time that you're sharing with people at another point in time, and there's something about that that really appeals to me.
Yeah.
But also, you get with sound workshops where you'll be given a bunch of recorders and told to go out and record sounds, and you turn that into a piece of oral artwork later on.
Digital recorders, yeah?
Yeah.
Not like...
if anyone does that, then yeah. They deserve the tambourines. Realizing that Rach no, you turn that into a piece of artwork later on. And there's no reason you can't do the same thing with photography. Take digital cameras out, or everyone's got one mobile phone, and then you just turn that into a form of artwork as you come back together, sort of a mosaic of pictures or a slideshow of pictures that tell some form of story.
Yeah. Any other comments about photography?
Yeah, what Angela has said about going on a prayer walk, and I know sometimes in worship I'll ask people where have they seen God at work during the past week. Well, actually, if you had a specific kind of photography focus, it would be, this is where I have seen God. However that idea.
Recorder players, everyone walks out with lots of recorders trying to record things. Then I thought, getting a bit confused. I've got
mass invasion of Christians with desk camp recorders. Sounds like a terrifying idea. He says, having been on the receiving end of that number of recorders.
Yeah. I think my only hesitation about the photography element is someone to stand up and go, and now I would like to share with you the 124 photos of me waiting at the bus stop. And it was like, Oh,
So you've
okay.
seen my Facebook posts then?
Oh yes, I have. It's a direct comment. No. But do you know what I mean? I think as long as with all of this stuff, actually, as long as it's curated in a way, as long as you're kind of bringing people along and kind of inviting them to just shed a little bit of light of that into it, then I think that would be quite an interesting way. And I'm definitely a big fan of the visual, and I think often we overlook that in our churches and otherwise. I think we are kind of starting to wrap things up, if that's okay, folks. And I think it's been an absolute pleasure to have you all on. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the folks in the chat as well. Thank you for watching, and feel free to comment if you're watching this at a later point, and we'll try and have a look at things that we've said, and look forward to joining us next time for our next episode of the Naked Chapel. So thank you to Elliot, thank you to Rach, thank you for Paul, and see you next time, hopefully. Bye-bye.
Bye.